Hello, and welcome everybody to another episode of Strick and Roll. I'm your host, Shwin. This is episode 29. I am joined by I don't even know a frequent guest of the pod. His name is Jordan Cohen. You can follow him on Twitter at sports_by_stats. Jordan, how are you doing? How are you enjoying the Winter World Cup?
Hey, yeah, I'm doing great. I've actually weirdly not watched a lot of the World Cup. Like, I think partially because it it's weird. It's a weird time of year, right? And it coincides with NBA season, which is just more fun, but also like weird human rightsy stuff in Qatar. So, kind of like not watching as much as I thought I would.
Yeah, steering clear, huh? All right. Well, before we get started, I do have to make an announcement that Strickland has an Instagram. Check that out. Give us a follow on there. You can follow us at thestrick.land on Instagram. Plenty of cool content that we're putting up there. So, again, please give us a follow. That is at thestrick.land on Instagram. We also have a YouTube page that is functional. You may even be watching this podcast on there. So please, if you are, hit like, subscribe, help us get to 1,000. That would be a huge help. And finally, the Strickland has a Patreon, which you may have heard. There are a few tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. Furthermore, you get access to the Strickland mailbag that comes out every other week that is hosted by Andrew Steele, aka Doug, aka the Doug Bag. There's further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to this pod right here, Strick and Roll, that I host and where I rant and rave about the Knicks even more. You also get access to wonderful weekly articles by Jack Cullen and Matthew Miranda, two of the best in the business. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier. That's come with a variety of additional benefits like listening in on pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day. Whether you choose to subscribe or not, none of this would be possible without you. So without further ado, let's get started. Everybody's heard, we talked about the Knicks. We will talk about the Knicks at some point. But I did want to have you on to talk a little bit about the Cavs, who I don't want to say they're struggling, but they've hit a little bump in the road. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think struggling is actually a fair description of what's going on. I
Yeah.
do.
Okay, and I guess just to talk about that, because of course, now the Knicks and the Cavs are inexorably tied forever due to Donovan Mitchell landing in Cleveland, just as everybody expected. And this is like a weird thing where um, the problems that the Cavs are having are like they're very different problems than whatever the problems the Knicks are having are. Um, and I think it's interesting, but like I don't think there's any question that like if you were in the Cavs position, you have to make the Mitchell trade. But I do think it's interesting to like look at some of the stuff that's going on with this team and just think about how that can like it just kind of brings up some of the stuff that inevitably happens when you do make a star trade, when you do cash in a bunch of your chips, be it in terms of depth, be it in terms of assets. Because effectively at this point, like Cleveland is kind of dead in the water is the wrong term, but like they're stuck in terms of the roster because they just don't have a lot of flexibility in that sense. That's not a terrible thing necessarily because you have chalked off the most important parts of team building, which are having your all stars, foundational pieces, however you want to phrase it. Um, but I do think it's interesting looking at this team. Like I'm just looking at some of the play-by-play data, and it's like it looks like the team really takes off, and this is interesting offensively. Both when they're better when it's just one of Mitchell and Garland on the floor together, and I think some of that's probably like you're figuring stuff out, and there's always weird noise and stuff. But like this is like this is always the thing, right? When you trade for a star and you combine them, is like how do they figure it out? Um, how has that worked, and like what issues are they having that you notice when they're playing together?
Yeah, so it's actually funny. Like, I don't think it is inherently Mitchell and Garland playing together that's the problem. And I think part of the problem is the Cavs have this great start, right? I think at some point we were like 10-2 or so. It's like
Mhm.
it was a great start.
Yeah, and they
And
beat
then
the Celtics
pressure,
twice. They like
yeah,
beat the
and then
Celtics twice,
pressure
which is great wins. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then pressure builds, right? They beat the Lakers twice too. Like then pressure builds. Like Lakers suck, but or don't suck, but they're not great. But like same idea, right? Big market team and pressure builds. And I think JB Bickerstaff has been overreacting to problems that are emerging. So like you guys, the Knicks, were actually the first team to like really use its defense against us, and it just like we lost the game pretty significantly. And then ever since that game, everybody does it, which is, I mean, it's ostensibly like a double drop, right? That you play two bigs or one big and one longer wing, and they both drop into the paint, and basically each one guards one of the Cavs bigs, and then the perimeter players blitz Mitchell and Garland. And the reason that works is the third guy that would be on the perimeter in that sense is either Lamar Stevens, who like at least is willing to shoot, but he can't shoot.
Interesting.
And then the second is
he was really cooking.
Okoro. Yeah. Well, he and Okoro played 40 minutes total last night, and neither got a point. But Okoro's playing a lot in those minutes too. And Okoro not only can't shoot, but he doesn't shoot. And so teams just don't guard him because you don't have to, which frees up the ability for that second big or that bigger wing to just drop into the paint, which means Garland and Mitchell kind of just at that point have to drive and hope they can make a miracle happen. Mitchell has done a lot of like step back threes and step back mid-range jumpers that seem to work really well. Like it actually worked pretty well against you guys too. But that's not like a reliable shot outcome, right? The Cavs started the season with a lot of off-ball movement from the second they inbounded the ball. Like, I mean, I was reading like Mike Prada's new book about spacing, and he talks a lot about this, that the Warriors, from the second they inbound, ran all of this off-ball movement. And so even before they're at the half-court line, the defense is already not sure where to be. And the Cavs did a lot of that to start the season. And I really think that game we lost against you guys against the Knicks was when teams really started just figuring out, like, we don't even need to worry about that because we're just going to drop two guys in the paint. And no matter what they do off ball, we're going to gamble that third guy can't shoot a three. Why JB Bickerstaff hasn't played Cedi Osman is weird to me. But also, if your season hinges on Cedi Osman being a starter or Dean Wade being a starter, like you're not in a good spot.
Yeah, I think the wing. I mean, and this was always like pretty obvious coming into the season that the wing would be like the weakness of the team and just general 3-point shooting. And like, I do think having Rubio come in will help a little bit because he can get on ball. So now you can leverage Mitchell and Garland off ball. I actually wouldn't be surprised if Bickerstaff tries all three of those guys together with Mobley and Allen and just see if like that can juice up the offense, improve the spacing. But I actually, so I want to go back to what you're talking about with the Knicks game. So the first time we played you guys, you're just getting wide open three after wide open three after wide open.
Kevin Love had his best game is in the Cavs uniform. So
yeah, that was insane. He was insane. But like it's also one of those things where it's like, were some of those threes contested? Sure. Like, was, obviously you have an out of body shooting experience. Okay, that's like that's some of it is bad luck, but some of that is just like the Knicks were not. You're not feeling them, right? Like Evan Fournier out there on the perimeter, like nobody is feeling that guy at all. It doesn't matter if he's right in your grill, like you know he's not going to really like block your shot, pick the ball, anything. Like so you're not feeling any of them. And that's kind of like what was going on. And that's why I thought Bickerstaff, like I generally tend to like him. Like I think that he's tried a lot of shit and I think that's pretty cool. And like he's clearly improved as a coach from what he was in Houston and all that stuff. But like, I thought his quotes after the Knicks game were really weird. Like he was like, "Oh, well, we got the shots that like we got exactly what we thought. We just didn't make any threes." And I'm like I watched that game twice and I'm watching it and I'm like, yeah, like you got some open threes and like, yeah, you missed some, but like, look at the threes. A lot of those threes you're getting, like they're not in rhythm threes, or they're like threes that you work really hard to get where it's like 5, 6, 7 passes have to happen, or like Mitchell has to like, dribble into the paint, draw 4 guys, and then like throw it over his head to somebody in the corner. These are not like easy threes that you're producing. That was not the same thing. And I just thought that comment was really weird. And it almost felt like he was just trying to like, I don't even want to say deflect because it wasn't deflecting, but he was kind of like, dismissing the struggles that were apparent in that game. And I just know I just felt it was really like odd and somewhat dismissive of like what I thought was like easily the Knicks' best defensive performance to that point. And honestly, even since then, like I know the Knicks have had a really nice run of defensive performances here, but like that one really stood out. I mean, what was the final score? It's like 92-81.
Yeah.
To hold any team in the NBA nowadays to 81 points is crazy. To hold that team to 81 points is wild. And like, yeah, I don't know. I thought that was weird, but I haven't watched too much of the Cavs since then. I watched the second half of the game yesterday. Feels like they're getting off to poor starts, and yeah, I guess like I don't really know what they're gonna do with the wing situation. Like we mentioned, like I think Rubio can help, but even then, it's like you're gonna go into a series against, let's say, Boston or something in the playoffs, and like let's be real, ultimately, this Cavs team, you make the trade they make, like it's nice that they're young, but at the end of the day, like you make that trade, like you should be judged as a contender. Like you're
Yep.
trying to win it all. And so like I just look at them and I'm like, I think they'll beat the shit out of the Sixers. I think that's a terrible matchup for Philly. I actually think they match up pretty well with Milwaukee. But it's like weird. I know they beat Boston twice. I think that's a rough matchup for them. I like all the wings that they have that they can throw out there. You assume that at some point, Horford's going to be healthy. Robert Williams gets back. I know that it looks like the Celtics are learning that apparently you don't get to shoot 48% from three for an entire season. The last couple of games, but like that's a matchup for me where it's like, yes, the Celtics do struggle guarding guards, um, but like, you look at what they did in that playoff run last year, and I just think like that's going to be a rough matchup for Cleveland unless they can figure out they don't need an awesome 3-and-D guy. They don't need some dynamic shot creator, but even getting somebody like, I don't know, like I don't really love the idea of Jay Crowder at the 3 in 2022, but like I do think like even getting somebody like Jay Crowder could be really useful for them.
Yeah, so on the Jay Crowder note, I would be highly surprised if it's Jay Crowder for a number of reasons, but one is
I don't
that
think he enjoyed his time in Cleveland, right?
no, and he left in a really bad spot with ownership. So, but two is no matter what everybody with the Cavs says, like if LeBron at any point says, I want to come back and retire as a Cav, the Cavs will make that happen. And the one way that won't happen is if Jay Crowder's on the team because LeBron and Jay Crowder despise each other. But also, like, I agree with you on the fit. And just to kind of address a few things, one is the JB point. I think JB's a great coach. Like,
Mhm.
I legitimately think, like, his ability to develop players. I mean, the fact that Dean Wade is, like, a viable starter for at least, like, a below average team or a team like the Cavs where you just need a body at that 3, like, that is credit to JB Bickerstaff. The fact that Lamar Stevens can play NBA minutes, that's credit to JB Bickerstaff. Like, and Garland was trash before JB came in. So, like, JB's a great player development coach. I think he's ballsy as can be. Like as you said, he tries shit, but like he tries so much shit. And I think part of what's happening now is right. It's like okay, the Cavs obliterate everybody to start the season, and they come close and beat Boston twice. And the only team that really gave us trouble early on was Toronto, right? And so then it's like JB feels like okay, if a problem emerges, I need to really work to fix it. And so Milwaukee was the first problem because Brook Lopez was just I mean, this season overall, Brook Lopez, I mean, looks like beyond an all-star. Like he looks like that second superstar next to Giannis. Like he has been incredible this year. But Brook Lopez gave us a lot of trouble. And then JB does some adjustments after that, but including against teams that aren't Milwaukee, where like he really started to separate the Allen and Mobley minutes, which was weird. He started playing Okoro a lot more, and I think that was like a reaction to we need somebody to throw up against Giannis. But I mean, Okoro can't shoot, and whenever you watch the Cavs, when Okoro comes in, you notice this. I think Okoro is a pretty solid man defender. Like if you don't ask him to do too much team defense, he's pretty good.
Mm.
But he's terrible at everything else. maybe like ball handling he's not terrible at, but like that's not enough. And so teams just don't defend him. And when he's playing out there on defense, teams throw him in a lot of motion because they know he'll make the wrong move. And so I think JB's almost overreacting to problems. And so that gets to kind of this like final point that you brought up, which is they don't have a wing. Like honestly, I think if this team goes into the playoffs, if playoffs started tomorrow, Lamar Stevens is probably the starting three. Maybe if Dean Wade gets healthy, it's him, or maybe if Rubio gets healthy, it's Mitchell. Right? Like I think those are your three options, and those are all terrible options. Right? Like Rubio,
Yeah.
Garland, Mitchell could work in spots, but that you don't want that as your starting lineup. And I think that's why the Cavs are getting off to bad starts, is that teams know. I think Garland's defense is actually pretty good. I saw something today that Garland like is taking pretty easy assignments, but his like differential, like from when he's guarding the player versus any other player, is pretty good. So I think he's like a pretty good man defender.
Yeah.
But what ends up happening is Mitchell is not. Like, there's all this stuff. Oh, Mitchell's so much better on defense this year. And like, I mean, yeah, compared to the playoffs last year, he's much better on defense. But he admitted that he wasn't trying in the playoffs. Like he basically was like, yeah, like I know I have to do better than that. Like, so teams are attacking Mitchell, and they're attacking like the Cavs pose this issue, which is if you want to drive, you are going to run into at least one of Mobley or Allen, likely both, and you will not score. And so teams have figured out, like, okay, we're just going to pass the ball around the perimeter a lot, see if we can throw off their scheme and then attack that way. And it doesn't really work that well. Like, Cavs still have a really, really elite defense.
I mean, they're the best defense in the league, right? I think
Yeah,
it's not even close right now. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But it works enough to get points. And meanwhile, again, basically since we played you guys, everybody is doing this like double drop or like 1.5 drop where like I mean Collins looked like a superstar defender last night. And Collins is not a superstar defender. Like he's not. Like that Spurs team doesn't have those players. And that's what he looked like last night because Garland and Mitchell want to drive. And if you're dropping 1 to 2 bigs every play, and those guards are playing with Allen and Mobley, there's just not space.
Yeah, I mean, part of this is like, and like, so one of the, I don't want to say it was a concern, but one of the reasons I was like, I think people are jumping the gun maybe a year too soon about like the Cavs being an immediate contender because I don't like putting that on a second year player because to me, the bet was like, okay, Mobley's going to be able to shoot close to league average-ish this year, just in terms of working the spacing. Because obviously Allen, like I know I've seen him take a couple like mid-range jumpers, but that's not exactly the space of the floor. The 3 spot, even with Dean Wade, like he's a fine shooter, but he's not like he's not like a Larry Markkinen level shooter out there. And like you're not going to play Love at the 3. Love isn't going to close games, especially on the fucking playoffs. Like, so the big bet here is that Mobley was going to be a reasonable shooter. That obviously has not happened. I don't even know what the hell he's shooting right now. It's not good. But like
he's better than last year. Like I will say that, like Mobley has expanded his range from last year. It's not good. I don't disagree, but like a lot of the Cavs' effective offense last night against the Spurs came from Mobley spacing out more into the mid range, like more by the elbow.
Yeah, I mean, and I know that like that's definitely part of it, but it's like he's shooting what 24% from 3 right now.
Right,
Like
he's not.
He
He hasn't that yet.
Yeah, and like this was always my like big thing is like I love Mobley. I think he's going to be I think he'll be a star. But like you're asking a lot of a second year player to just be like, hey, guess what? We're competing for championships now. And it's like, wait, what are we doing? And it's like he's still in the part of his career where like he's got to figure shit out. Like I was listening to SI's pod Open Floor with Herring, and he's like, yeah, I don't even know if they really need a 3-and-D guy because like, Mobley can just defend those wings. Like, Garnett could probably have done that, and he's kind of like modern day Garnett. And I'm like, can we like let's just pump the brakes a little bit, like I think that there'll be a time when that's like a thing he can do, and he can still do that right now in like instances. But to be like, hey, go into a playoff series and be like, hey, just we need you to check Jason Tatum real quick. Like that's not a fair expectation of him. And I just want to yeah, like and I guess like ultimately I'm just curious to see what this team does because, like, you mentioned Chetty Osman. I think he has like the highest on off on the team of the regular.
I actually think Chetty's been great this year. I don't know why he does not play more. I think he's been
Yeah,
really great.
and
But
I just yeah, and I just like okay, maybe there's something going on there. Like I think he's got like what another year in his contract left after this, so he might want to maybe get a trade or something. But like, um, I think they just have to use him to get a different wing then. Like it just has to happen. And I think like, some of this is Chetty's really good, but he's also not exactly like, some knockdown 3-point shooter either, right? Like he's not that pure shooter that I think they really kind of need to make this lineup sing. Can they get that guy? I don't know. Like this is the thing, right? Like you look at a guy like the guy everybody would want, and I think that a lot of contenders want right now is Bogdanovich. And like Bogdanovich would be awesome, but are you going to trade for Bogdanovich? I don't know. Like, and what do you even have to trade for him, right? So it's like finding the type of shooter, the caliber of shooter that you need, who also kind of slots in on the wing, gives you a little bit more size there. It's just really hard for them. It's a really hard thing to figure out in season. Like, it feels like one where they're gonna have to wait to the offseason and they're just gonna deal with what they have right now. Wait to the offseason. I think in the offseason they still have cap. They will have cap space, I believe, and they might also have access.
no, they won't. It's a problem. Like the problem the Cavs have right
is it
now,
because the Mitchell trade they used up the expirings right in that?
yeah, and then they have Allen on a big contract. They have Garland on a max, and then eventually they're gonna have to sign Mobley. And like I know Dan Gilbert's been willing to spend over the tax like before, but that was when the team was like clearly going to the finals every year. This is a different situation.
So you're gonna have to nail the exception, basically. I mean, a guy like I would love for you guys to go after, and I actually am surprised more contenders aren't linked with him, given how he shot the last few years. But like, and you had him before. Go get Alec Burks.
Oh, I love Alec Burks.
Yeah,
I would like Alec Burks is the guy. Like if you get Alec Burks, like I feel much more confident about this team. Not because I think Alec Burks is great, but he's actually like a really smart player.
Yeah, I love
and he's
him,
a good
dude.
enough shooter. Yeah, Alec Burks, the other guy, like Richardson from the Spurs, is another guy. Like he torched us last night, but generally speaking, like that's a guy that he has a better shot selection than Karis LeVert, but kind of can do some of those Karis LeVert-y things.
LeVert, we'll talk about.
Yeah,
LeVert.
I mean, so like the big problem the Cavs have is Love is on a giant expiring and LeVert is on a giant expiring. And even with both of those contracts expire, the Cavs aren't under the cap.
And I think like the other problem is like, so if they expire, right? I think Love is going to come back. He's going to come back at a reduced whatever they'll agree to some contract. But like Levert's expiring is tricky because it's like you don't want to lose that salary slot. But like, what are you going to get for Levert, and what can you even attach? Like, so I mean, I don't think they would want Evan Fournier given like how he's fallen off a cliff. But like, can you take? I think you guys still have some second round picks, right? Like, can you attach a few second round picks to Levert and turn that into another guy who fits better? Like maybe, I don't know, but like it's so hard to say because what the hell is Levert's trade value? Like it feels like they bought high on him, and I kind of got why they did it. I have no problem with the risk they took there. But like that obviously tied up one of their picks. Like they owe their pick this year. So like there's that part of it. And then yeah, it's just like he's obviously not a great fit with Mitchell and with Garland there and with Rubio coming back. So it's like what you really need is to turn this slasher into more again of like an off-ball player. Is there a team that's interested? I have no idea. Maybe not. Like I would try and look at a team like I think a guy like Malik Beasley from Utah would be really useful for you. I don't know what the hell Danny Ainge wants. I mean, I know Trader Danny always gets his price, but like he did what? He ended up trading Beverly for basically nothing. He got Taylor Horton Tucker. He traded Bogdanovich for nothing. Like absolutely nothing. I think they got Olynyk and whatever. And I guess Olynyk's having a decent season, but like I'd rather have Bogdanovich.
And Utah's already shown like a lot of what they did early in the season were just kind of fool's gold. Like they had just incredibly hot shooting to start the year.
Oh, it was ludicrous. And then like, yeah, I mean, Markkanen is I'm happy for him, but let's also like Is Larry Markkinen actually like a star? Probably
No,
not.
he's a good player. But he's
Yeah.
Larry fucking Markkinen. Like, right? Like, he's not like he was great for the Cavs last year. Like, I will die on this hill that like it's not surprising he's playing as well as he is in Utah to me. Like, he was really good last year, but he's Larry Markkinen, right? Like,
Yeah.
his really good is his ceiling.
Yeah, and I actually like I think JB Bickerstaff deserves a ton of credit where it's like I've talked about this before, but it's like if Markkinen played, and I don't even think this is really a criticism of Tibbs, but it's like if Markkinen was on the Knicks, he would only play the 4 or the 5. There's no chance Tibbs would ever look at him and be like, "Yeah, Markkinen at 3, let's do it." Like he wouldn't do it. And I think most coaches in the NBA would have looked at Markkinen. Like look at his first 4 years in the NBA, right? Like he's basically just playing the 4 and a little bit of 5 in Chicago. And like, yes, I know Boylan is a boomer and whatever, but like even, Billy Donovan, who has tried stuff in his like historically,
Wasn't doing it.
yeah, didn't do it. I think and Bickerstaff and actually like the front office too, they deserve a lot of credit because they caught a lot of shit. I'm sure. I think you were pretty like skeptical of the move when they traded for him. I didn't. I thought it was stupid, but it's like they had drafted Mobley. Obviously, they had Allen in the fold by then. So you're like, wait, what is the plan here? Why are we getting Lauri Markkinen? But they and JB Bickerstaff clearly had a plan of like, hey, let's just try this at the 3 and see what happens. It worked. Guess what? Like, and they figured out and kind of it like I don't want to say it saved his career, but it definitely like painted him in a new light, and he's really benefited from that. Utah's been playing him at the 3 a bunch too, and I think like that's a big thing. But like, you know, it's just again like his skill set as a shooter, and the fact that he can play the 3, and the fact that like yeah, he's not a great defender, but you play him next to Mobley and Allen, all of a sudden like his defense is not problematic at all,
Right.
and yeah, like finding it just you have to make that trade 100 times out of 100. I will like literally never, this is not like Minnesota trading for Gobert. This is not even the Hawks trading for DeJounte Murray, which was a much lesser haul, but to me a way worse fit. I also think DeJounte or that Donovan Mitchell is just a flat out better player than DeJounte. And like, the Mitchell Gobert thing is weird, but let's be honest, Donovan Mitchell's skill set is way more important in the playoffs than Rudy Gobert's skill set wherever it'll be. But like you have to take that risk. But I think obviously some of the issues that are coming up now are just the result of, you trade Markkinen in that deal. Sexton's gone. So that's not that Sexton was a great fit, but he's also just a piece that you no longer have now to trade. You traded all your picks, like swaps, whatever. You're kind of just out of whatever you have. So they basically, I mean, aside from exceptions this offseason, you're looking at a situation where it's like you're almost locked in trade wise, unless you can do, like we talked about LeVert in a couple seconds or whatever. You're really locked in probably until like the 2024 draft. And like on
Yeah.
draft night, you can make a trade with that pick, but it's like it's really tough for them right now. So they've shown the ability to find talent in weird places. And I will say, like, a big thing for them that's kind of fucked them is it sounds so ridiculous to say because he's barely played, but it's like Dylan Windler constantly being hurt is a problem because he's a guy they were probably like, we think he can shoot the shit out of the ball. We think he can play the 3 for us. He could be our Sam Hauser, right? Like,
Right.
but you're not getting anything from that guy right now.
Right. I mean, so I would be shocked if LeVert isn't on or if LeVert is on the team by the end of the season. And it's not because like I dislike LeVert. Like I had this tweet and I said LeVert is basically like Larry Hughes, and everybody's like, "Oh, LeVert is so much better." But like Larry Hughes for the Wizards was this guy that was just like all around a solid player. Like he's a solid defender, a solid ball handler, could score a little bit. But his problem was Larry Hughes' entire offensive game was as a slasher.
Yeah.
And when you're on a Wizards team, that the expectation is to maybe make the playoffs, like to fight for it, and you play with Gilbert Arenas, that's a great skill set. When you go to the Cavs and you play with LeBron James, that's useless. And I think LeVert is similar. I think LeVert's actually a little bit better than Hughes was because LeVert's actually, I think, a fairly like team-oriented player. But it's just not a fit. And like they're not going to extend him because if you extend him, you cannot resign Mobley. Well, I mean, again, you could, but the cost is just insane. So they're going to get rid of him. And if you don't trade him, that expiring doesn't do anything for you. Like you're still under the cap or you're still over the cap if he just expires and walks. and he hasn't been that great this year. And so I think LeVert is going to get traded. Chetty Osman's a guy that's been asking for a trade for a while, off and on, but everybody kind of knows he wants to go if he's not going to get major minutes. And I think they have a few seconds they can move, but like beyond that, unless some team wants Isaac Okoro or like I don't think they'll trade Dean Wade just given the state of the current roster. But I guess if they could get like a real 3-and-D wing, or even just a 3 wing, and like you worry about the D later, maybe Wade gets his trade bait. But like the only type of trade I can see the Cavs making, and I think they will do this, is you get a good player that can help you, like start on that as a 3, and then you take back a fuckload of salary that's you're gonna have for a few years. I think that's the move. And I don't know where that is. Like I don't know what team that is attractive to, but I think that's the only move they have. That's only unless some team is just dumb or like really values one of the Cavs players more than like the market. I think that's the only move they can make is the LeVert trade where you take back salary.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm curious about this. I'll throw this out there. You know, I tend to believe that if the team is as good as look, the metrics love the Cavs. I think looking out, forgetting the issues that we're talking about in the immediate term, long term, most everybody, I certainly do. I'm pretty bullish about where this team will end up. But like we're talking about how can you find different pieces to put around these guys. There's a world, right? There's a world where Evan Mobley never becomes some dynamic 3-point shooter or something. Now, and there's also a world, and I think you and I have talked about this, and a lot of people agree, long term, his best position is likely to be the 5. That doesn't mean he can't play with another big, but I do think it might mean that he has to play with a big that has a different skill set from Jarrett Allen. Jarrett Allen's really good. You can argue that like he is the single biggest reason for why the defense has performed at the level it has since last season when he's healthy. Especially they've basically been like the number 1 defense in the league when he's healthy. Like might be a time, maybe in a year, 2 years or something, where you're looking at this and you're like, you know what? To get the type of wing talent, perimeter talent, scoring talent, whatever that we need to put around Garland, Mitchell, Mobley, we might have to move this guy. And I think that's like something that people haven't discussed because, to his credit, like Allen has made a leap since he got to Cleveland that I certainly didn't expect. I don't think most people expected it. Maybe just like the diehard Nets fans. So shout out to them, all 3 of them. But like he's made. It's just like a really interesting thing where I'm looking at this and I'm like, I don't think there's a chance in hell they'd ever trade Mobley. And it's like you're not going to trade Mitchell because you just traded the whole boat for him. Maybe if he goes, maybe if it's his last year of his contract, and he's like, I'm not staying here. Trade me.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the only scenario I could see. Garland seems thrilled. He just signed his 5-year fucking massive.
Yeah, and Garland's potential still, like everybody's like, oh, he's not been as good this year. But by the numbers, he's been just as good this year as he was last year. It's just that, right, he's playing with Mitchell, and when you watch them side by side, it's like, well, Mitchell's a superstar.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like,
yeah.
they're not going to get rid of Garland. I think the Cavs view Garland like a Damian Lillard type talent. Like this guy that when he reaches his peak, not if, but when, he is going to be a guy that if he was your second option, you could win a title. Like that good.
Yeah, no, and I just think it's like really interesting to look at this because it's like the Mobley Allen thing, it has worked, but I do think that like there is real questions about I don't want to say viability because I think it would be viable in the regular season for the next fucking 10 years if they want it. But like you're not in it for the regular season, right? I mean, no team ultimately is. You're trying to win a championship. And I do wonder like is there a ceiling there on that remains in place unless Mobley really extends his range out? And like I don't think anybody can say for sure, like, oh yeah, no, Mobley's going to become some volume like league average 3-point shooter, right? Like, I don't even know how you can say that. So it's, I don't know. I think the Allen Mobley thing is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, right. So the Cavs are winning games even during this like streak where they're struggling based off this defense. right? They can just lock teams down. Like even last night against San Antonio, in that fourth quarter, the defense woke up and San Antonio couldn't buy a bucket. And like I know the Cavs lost, but it was not because of that fourth quarter. They destroyed the Spurs in the fourth quarter, and largely just based on defense. So as long as that's the case, they're not going to get rid of Allen. At some point, the Cavs may need to have the conversation that having the number one defense, if we don't have spacing, doesn't matter. Like it will win us enough regular season games based off Mitchell being the superstar and Garland being really good and Mobley developing. But it at the end of the day, come playoffs, is not a viable way to win. And like you saw that last night, right? The Cavs defense locked in, but they couldn't buy a three because there's no spacing. And when you can't buy a three, it's much harder to make those comebacks. It's much harder to buy a basket. If Mobley becomes like a decent, not even average, but like for a big in the NBA, a decent shooter, then this becomes viable. I think that's unlikely. I think people may, right? Mobley gets compared to Giannis, and it's like, it's just a different player. Even Giannis as a kid, like Giannis came into the league as a wing because he wasn't as tall, right? So yeah, Giannis grew, but that's not, he was never trained to be a big. Whereas Mobley's played his entire career as center, right? So I think that Mobley, the better kind of, and I don't mean this like I think he's going to become this, but if you want to make a superstar comparison, as a four, I think the best comparison is like a Kevin Garnett type player. Now, if you want to make it as a five, that changes things. And I think that, again, brings him into this weird, we've never seen a player like him type talent. But so the question needs to be, if you put him at the five, like I think even this year, when he plays the five, the Cavs' offensive numbers are pretty good. Like, because it opens up the floor. And that is assuming Okoro is not playing or Stevens isn't playing while he's at the five. And I don't remember the lineup data in that situation, but I think it's pretty good.